People must come to Lincoln from all over the world to see the cathedral. The cathedral is in a prominent position, built near the castle on the highest point in town, so perhaps there's an excuse for there being no signposts pointing to it. I did a recce on the afternoon I arrived. I just managed to get up the near vertical streets on the approach. I saw where Lawrence of Arabia once lived. It was okay for him, he was young and fit. At the top of the hill I discovered, by closely examining the bus stop, that there was a bus which could have brought me here. It was a relief that I would be able to get this bus back to ground level after my review of the cathedral. If you turn to your left at the top of the hill, you will see Lincoln Castle. So let's have a look in there first. Apart from the ducks, here you can see one of the few remaining original copies of Magna Carta. It's in a darkened room to protect it from light deterioration, and you need good eyesight to see it, so don't expect too much. From the walls you can see several of the coal-fired power stations which are famously strung out along the River Trent. The castle was built in 1068 inside the existing Roman fort area on the orders of William I. 166 Saxon homes were removed to create the space. In 1072, William I ordered the building of a cathedral at Lincoln. Another thing you can see just before you leave the castle is what is believed to be the last remaining fragment of the Lincoln Eleanor Cross. So let's go across now and have a look at the cathedral. Lincoln Cathedral is one of those things which suffers, as far as I'm concerned, from being oversold. People will say that when you enter through the gateway and see this massive man-made cliff, you will be stunned. In these circumstances, I always find that I am disappointed by not being stunned. However, here it is. Do go and see it for yourself. The 1072 building, ordered by William I, was finished in 1092, but was destroyed by fire in 1141. The cathedral was then rebuilt and extended, but this was destroyed by an earthquake in 1185. So only the central portion of this west front, with its 3 deep recesses, survives from the first Norman building. The lower stages of these western towers survive from the second building. Just have a look at this doorway. State of the art in the 11th century. The building started after the earthquake is basically what we have today. At each rebuild, the building was enlarged and the eastern end moved further eastwards. Looking at the state of some of the stoneware as we go around, you can just imagine how big the maintenance bill is. We've come down the south side now and have a look up at the central tower. The 5.5-ton bell is called Great Tom. Moving a little further along the south side brings us to what is called the Judgment Porch. I hate to think why. Now, near the end of the south side, on one of the buttresses, we find a representation of King Edward I and his Queen Eleanor. I am preparing a film about the Eleanor crosses. It may be ready by the time you've watched this film. Now, the east end, and the chapter house with its flying buttresses. And stood near here is a statue of Tennyson the poet. Apparently he was a local lad. Looks like he had a dog as well. Now, to finish our circuit of the outside of Lincoln Cathedral, we have to come out onto this road to get back to the west door. Now, time's getting on. We'll just have a brief look inside and do the rest tomorrow. I think I can just about reach the bus stop now and get back to my hotel. When I came back to the bus stop afterwards, I discovered that the service finished at 5 o'clock. Now, just hold tight and we'll have a look at the inside of Lincoln Cathedral. At the time of the conquest, 1066, Lincoln was the fourth city in England after London, Winchester and York. When the new Diocese of Lincoln was created, in effect it took over the diocese from Dorchester-on-Thames and covered a large part of eastern England. William Byrd was organist here from 1563 to 72. The stone screen dates from about 1300. Now look, that's the end of our peace and quiet. We've been joined by what must be every 10 or 11-year-old schoolchild in Lincolnshire. Apart from the noise and commotion, I now have to be careful where I point my camera, but they're everywhere. I spent the rest of my time here waiting for a hand on my shoulder, placed by the nearest local zealot, accusing me of being a pedagogue. It's a sad little world we live in, isn't it? Mind you, I do remember our Lord saying, "Suffer the little children come unto me." The chapels along this side of this transept are dedicated to the armed services. There is a window commemorating Lincolnshire-born Captain John Smith, the first governor of Virginia. Lincoln Cathedral has especially strong ties with Bomber Command, much of which was based around here in World War II. Those were the service chapels just inside that transept, and we're now going to go through this door. A very nice door frame here, and through it we can see right down to the east end of the cathedral. We'll look at that later. For now we're going to turn right through that archway into the choir. The eastern end of the 1072 building came to about halfway down this choir, which incidentally is called St. Hugh's Choir. The eastern end of the second building, started in 1186, was just behind where this high altar now stands. It is this secondary building, after the earthquake, which still forms the major part of the present-day building, and it was commenced under the guidance and inspiration of Bishop Hugh of Avalon. He later became a saint, hence St. Hugh's Choir, and is highly thought of at Lincoln. This is the lesser eastern transept. At the northern end of it there is a doorway which gives access to the cloister and the chapter house. The cloister is 13th century, and we're still under the northern end, which is a replacement of about 1674, designed by Wren. This chapter house is 13th century, and several of the earliest meetings of the English Parliament took place here, including the one in February 1301 when Edward I created his son, the Prince of Wales. Edward I was also in this area when his wife Eleanor died in 1290. Right, we're back in the smaller eastern transept and we're going to make our way to the east end of the cathedral. This square eastern end dates from the period 1258 to 1280. It replaced a curved apsidal end with radiating chapels like Norwich and so many European cathedrals. This area, with its massive 8-light window, is known as the Angel Choir. In the Angel Choir can be found several monuments, the first of which perhaps I ought to mention is that of Queen Eleanor. This figure is actually a Victorian reproduction, the original one having been smashed up by the usual self-righteous zealots. You can also see here a fine old Easter sepulchre and the final resting place of Catherine Swynford, third wife of John of Gaunt, and her daughter Joan Beaufort. But perhaps we ought to end our pilgrimage to Lincoln Cathedral, as so many have done in the past, at the tomb of St. Hugh. It must be mainly St. Hugh who, among men, we have to thank for this building, which we have inherited in spite of the effects of aging and decay and the despoliation caused by people who no doubt honestly believed that God wanted them to smash anything in it of beauty.